Okay. Hi, everyone. So welcome to Epic Solutions Limited webinar, the second edition of this webinar, this which is about tips on academic, commercial, or self-publishing. So this webinar will be presented by Mr. Bob Morowitz. He's also Robert Morowitz. He's from editor-in-chief for Journal of Gospel Musics. So I'll give you a brief background about Bob. He's also Robert Marowitz, so we can call him Bob. So he's an independent writer who specializes in music history. So he has written several album notes, including for the gospel, according to the Malaco. I'm sorry if I spelled it wrong. So which earned him Grammy nominations in 2019. So he also wrote a city called Heaven, Chicago, and Birth of Gospel Music. So from University of Illinois Press in 2015, and he's at work on his second book. So he has also published which is also published by University of Illinois Press. So apart from that, he's also a founder and editor of Journal of Gospel Music. So you can know more about Robert Marowitz on www.journalofgospelmusic.com. So this is a brief introduction of Mr. Bob. So over to you, Bob, so you can continue your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Raj. Appreciate it. And thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me to present to the audience today. I appreciate it. I will share my screen here so that you can see my presentation. And let's see, we probably just need to give me that option.
Yes.
Ah, good. Okay, let me
Yes, you
see.
can now. Good.
Ah, good. Yes, here we go. Here we go. All right. Again, thank you for attending this presentation. I'm assuming that if you're here, you are considering publishing your first book, or perhaps you've already written a book and you want to sort of take your writing career to the next level. And what I'm going to provide for you today, and again, thanks to Apex Solutions for inviting me to provide this webinar, is my personal experience. Having been published on a number of fronts, and pursuing other types of publishing as well, some of the things that I learned along the way. So this isn't necessarily an academic or a well vetted project. This is sort of my experience in sort of going through the process. And I hope that by presenting this material to you today, that it saves you some of the time and trouble and missteps that I made along the journey, because I didn't have the benefit of a presentation like this to help me. So I hope this one helps you avoid the mistakes, some of them that I made. I think the first thing that we want to do is just and again, thank you, Raj, for your your introduction. These are just some of the projects that I have worked on over the past few years. I'll give you just a real quick point on my journey to writing. I was in fundraising for NGOs for since 1985. From 1985 to 2006, I was a full-time fundraiser, and a series of circumstances allowed me to sort of go from full-time to part-time in 2007 to do what I thought I probably had been meaning to do for a very long time, and that is to write a book. And the book on the far left, A City Called Heaven, Chicago and the Birth of Gospel Music, was the product of that. I had been, writing for work, for fundraising for many years, but I had never written a book. And this was my first experience. And I started in 2007 doing the research, and it was published in 2015. So that gives you a good sense of how long sometimes it can take from the inception of a book to the final publishing. And that includes all the things we're talking about today in terms of the steps of publishing. Which gets me to, before we really get into the pros and cons of the different types of publishers that that exist and which ones might work best for your project, I think that it's important to step back and just think about the preparation of writing. It's something that I think is important to consider before you even step into the world of publishing. You know, I'm going to leave you with three letters that have stuck with me throughout my process, and that is the letters D, E, and F, and they stand for discipline, energy, and focus. Those are the things you need to be a published writer, a published author. It is a daunting task that you're about to embark on, one not to be taken lightly. It's very difficult. Unless you are an already successful author, the chances are that you are doing other things, one job, two jobs, three jobs, managing a family, children, other activities. And so the amount of time that you have available for writing is minimal. And again, unless you're a Stephen King or a John le Carre, rest his soul, you probably don't have all day to write. So discipline, energy, and focus are critical if you're going to actually take your project from the beginning to an end. A lot of people talk about writing a book. Not so many actually do it, and it's because there are so many things that can get in your way. I think you need to consider very seriously before you do it the investment of time. And as you'll see, there is an investment of cost associated with writing. Writing is not an easy way to make a buck. Again, unless you write about vampires or chocolate or something, you're probably writing to a limited audience, or at least a limited audience at first. And so do not expect that this is any kind of a get rich quick scheme. It is really about taking your creativity, putting it on paper and sharing it with potential readers. So understand that there will be opportunity costs lost in writing, and but if you are committed to writing, you are prepared to take that chance, that risk, that you will sacrifice opportunities that you might have taken otherwise in order to write. You might have you might have to go into your savings. For my first book, I had to empty my savings account in order to pay for everything to do. So, know that there's those significant costs of time and money on your part. And also this issue of time. I really admire people who say, I get up at 6 a.m. in the morning and I write until 8 and then I get on with my day. I think that's fantastic if you can do it. I am barely coherent at 6 a.m. I can barely spell my name at 6 a.m. So I am not the kind of person who's able to get up at 6 a.m. every morning and write for 2 hours. Some but so if you're not that kind of person, and I'm certainly not that kind of person, do not fret. Find the time that works for you. For me right now, as Raj mentioned, I am working. My second book is in production, and I am sort of doing the research for my third book. And I just right now have Friday afternoons available for that. So I use Friday afternoons, and that is my time. I protect that time as much as possible to work on the research for my third book. For my second book, which I started in 2013 and will be published at the end of next year. I didn't have a specific time other than I would try to every day write 500 words, or every day I would try to write 600 or 700 words, or whatever I gave myself time to write. And so that is the way. And then when it came down to editing and so forth, I gave myself, well, I'm going to edit 5 pages today, 5 pages tomorrow. So that's, again, that discipline and focus that you really need to write a book. And then the other thing before we go on in terms of preparation is, and it does depend, the kind of publisher you're looking for is really a result of the kind of book you want to write. Are you planning to write fiction? And is it, what kind of fiction is it? Is it young adult fiction? Is it children's fiction? Is it adult fiction? Is it mystery? Is it comedy? Is it drama? Is it historical? Whatever kind of fiction it is, as you'll see as we go through this presentation, the publisher you choose is based on the kind of book you're writing, because certain publishers have interest in certain types of books, and you want to make sure that the publishers you approach are the ones that match up with the kind of book you're writing. You will just be wasting your time and theirs if you submit your materials to a publisher that does not. If you're doing a gothic romance and you submit it to a publisher who's based interested really in children's. They're not even going to pay any attention to it. So do yourself a favor, and we'll talk about doing research in this presentation. If you're a nonfiction writer, again, the same thing applies. Are you writing history? Is it a memoir of your life? Is it a biography or an autobiography? Is it narrative nonfiction? Is it in within even those categories? Are we talking about something that's a how-to book? Is it on the arts? Is it business? Is it science? Is it something about, an illustration or art, like the performing or the visual arts? Is it a coffee table book? Again, all of these things come into play when you're preparing to write. Know what kind of book you want to write, and that will help you find the right publisher. Now, a lot of my experience, no, I wouldn't say a lot, all of my experience is in nonfiction. But I know that a lot of you that are watching this webinar are thinking of fiction. And so I want to make sure to incorporate fiction as much as possible. And in so doing, I want to mention this book if you haven't read it already. I read this book, oh gosh, 15 years ago. Not so much that I wanted to write a novel, but I just wanted to learn more about writing techniques. And I found this book very helpful. This is a uncompensated endorsement. Just How to Grow a Novel is a great book by Saul Stein. And it just talks about how do you organize your thoughts? Because, writing is a mixture of art and science. There's the creativity part. Certainly you must have that. But there's also this whole aspect of writing that, again, the discipline and the focus of being able to coordinate your thoughts in such a way that it makes for compelling reading. You will never, ever be, I would hope you are never at a point in your writing where you think, I've learned everything there is to learn. I have been writing now, full time since 2009, and I still know that I don't know everything there is to know about writing. Every project I work on, I learn something new. Every article I write, I learn something new. Even just from turning it into an editor and having the editor come back, I learned so much from editors, and you will too. But How to Grow a Novel has some great, just practical tips. And I encourage you, if you are writing your first novel, or if you are writing a second or third novel and you just want to learn more, this is a good way to do it. So let's get into the publishing part. I'm going to start with university press because that's the experience that I have the most. That is where I've been doing my publishing. And so I have the most expertise and experience in walking you through this process. But parts of this process are parts of every process. And so if you're not thinking of going to a university press, or if you think after this presentation, a university press isn't for you, still some of these tips that we're going to share with you are important for you to know, no matter who you go to for a publisher. Almost any publisher except for self-publishing, and even maybe some of those, will want a book proposal. It is a way for you to state your case. Now, for those who are not familiar with university presses, they are academic presses run by a university. I work with the University of Illinois Press, but there are as many presses probably as there are major universities, and they all have different guidelines. Now, the nice thing about the university press is that you can go to their websites and see what they accept, who the particular editor is that you should be contacting about your project, and their book proposal guidelines are offered there as well. Or at least once you connect with the university press representative, then you will be given a book proposal guideline to follow. And it is very important to follow that because they get hit with book proposals all the time. And so the more you can stay within the guidelines that they provide, the better off you will be. It's, when they're inundated with so many proposals, if somebody provide something that looks nothing like the guidelines they offered, they might just put it to the side. Even if you have a winning book idea, it may get left to the side just because it doesn't quite fit their format. But some of the things that a book proposal is going to ask you to identify about your book, and these are good these are important things to think about, even just before you go to any kind of a publisher. But definitely the book proposal is going to want to know, a description of the project. Give us a couple of pages, single spaced, on what your book is about. If it's nonfiction, what's the story? Uh, University presses aren't so keen on fiction, although check the website, because some of them are, some of them aren't. However, for fiction and for nonfiction, there will be a book proposal that you must fill out. For the nonfiction, it's a description of the project. What's the point? What are you trying to argue in your book that's distinctive from other books on the same subject? Maybe your book is the first one on that subject. You'll want to let them know that. Make sure you've done your due diligence to make sure of that, so that you don't say this is the first book on the subject and they come back and say, well, what about book A, B, and C? And you didn't know about it. Do your due diligence before you say that, but let them know why your book is different from someone else's book. And they're going to ask you who you think the audience is for your book, because this is, after all, they need to sell your book, and they have to make money. They have to show a profit. Even if it's a nonprofit press, they need to show a profit at the end. The nonprofit only means that they don't have to pay income tax. They have a charitable mission, but it doesn't mean that at the end of the year they are not required to show that they made money on their project. So they don't want to lose money on a book, and so it's sort of like a loan at the bank. They're going to want to check it all out and make sure that it's sellable. And part of that is the audience. Is there an audience for your book? And if there is, and presuming there is, because you're writing this book and there's an audience out there, talk about that audience. Who would be most interested in the book you're writing? And how big is that market? Maybe it's for a general audience, or maybe it's just on an aspect of the Vietnam War. Well, there's several aspects of audiences, and maybe audiences interested in the Vietnam War itself, or audiences interested in 1960s and 1970s fiction, nonfiction, historical information on military. Uh, uh, these are the kinds of things. Or maybe your book is set in a certain area. Maybe it's about individuals who went to the Vietnam War from California, and then there's maybe people have interest in California history. So you want to kind of give them the size of the market and the dimensions of your market, so they know how important this book might be and how many people might be very interested in it. Also, in that point, your past experience as a writer or as any kind of a public figure make a difference. We see a lot of books put out by celebrities. Some of them, by the way, are ghost written, and we won't get into ghostwriting in this particular webinar, but why is it that somebody who's a famous celebrity can have a ghost written book and it sells hundreds of thousands of copies, and it might not even be that great of a book, but the publisher knows this person has a huge audience. They'll buy this book, even if it's written in Latin, they'll buy the book. Part of it is your marketability as a person and your subject. If you have a blog, or you have a column, or you have a television show, or you have a radio show or something, and you have 200,000 followers, well, that's going to be pretty important to any publisher. In terms of the marketability of your book. The competition, again, we talked about if your book may be the only one in its subject, maybe there is no competition. However, there probably is competition somewhere, even if it's in similar subjects. My book on gospel music in Chicago was the first book just about Chicago gospel, but it wasn't the only book that ever referenced Chicago gospel music. And so in my book proposal, we talked about the other books that had some portion of the narrative, very good, very solid books that talked about gospel music in Chicago as part of the overall narrative. And we mentioned those as well. And sometimes even books on, like in Chicago music. Well, you might not think a book on Chicago blues might be a competition, but it could be, because for somebody who's just interested in Chicago music, Chicago gospel, Chicago blues, Chicago jazz, those are all kind of competing books. What's the format? And this means size. Now, let me give you a huge tip. If you are a first-time fiction writer and you propose to write a book that's going to be 175,000 words or 700 pages. I guarantee you, unless you are a internationally known personality, it's not going to be published. The public publisher will not accept it. You're not a proven writer. You're not, you're not Tom Wolfe or anyone who, or Stephen King or people know. If you're an unproven writer, there is absolutely no way on earth they're going to take a chance on selling a book that big that they'd have to, price fairly extensively to sell. So typically, I want to say that it generally the length of a fiction book is in the 75,000 to 90,000 range. Nonfiction book maybe 80 to 280 to 120,000 words. You don't go beyond that. Some publishers and a university press will be very explicit about that. Only have a limit. They will not accept any publications that are greater than, say, 125,000 words. Just it's hard to publish it. It's hard to price it. And so if you're a fiction writer and you want to publish a book that you think is going to be 750 pages and it's your first book, chances are no one will take that seriously. It will also ask you, is this going to be hardcover? Do you anticipate soft cover, ebook? Who are the sources that you're using in terms of your research if you're doing nonfiction? Also, a little bit on your background, who you are, why you're writing this book, why are you the expert in this area? And that's very important because, again, they want to know, is this going to be a book that's credible? If the person who's writing it does not have any experience in the subject matter, it's a red flag. So they want to know, what are your credentials? How did you come about to decide to write this particular book? And then simultaneous submissions, because it's often the case where you'll be shopping this book to several presses, and the university press wants to know where they stand in terms of all this. When a university press says they see your book proposal, and also they'll probably want a chapter or two sample of your writing on this book. So before you even consider this, you're going to want to have a couple of chapters that are at least reasonably completed so you could submit it. So they have a sample of your writing and a sample of what you propose to do in your book proposal. Once they say, okay, we're intrigued, we'd like to submit this book proposal and chapters to peer review. That's a university press thing. It's not a commercial or self-publishing. University presses send book proposals and chapters that they're of projects they're interested in to 2 or 3 others who have expertise in the area. And I've served as peer review on a number of projects. And our job is to look over the book proposal and provide our thoughts. The university press has its thoughts, and now it's up to us to say, we've read this book proposal. We think this person has the capacity and the expertise and the fixed purpose to do what he or she said she plans to do. We read through the chapters. We make recommendations based on our expertise. We provide these recommendations back to the press. And then if the press gets a positive peer review from a majority, unless one of the persons has a very compelling reason why it should not be published, and it does happen, they will provide that information back to you, the writer. Here's what the peer review had to say, and they're going to say if it in fact has been accepted for further consideration, they'll ask you, can you make the changes that the peer reviewers recommend? And those could be very simple things like additions. Have you thought about bringing in this aspect of the subject? Or have you considered looking at these reference works that might help you? Or, just simple things like that. I have been the recipient of 2 peer reviews. Every time it improved my writing. Every time it taught me something about the subject I was writing about that I thought, yes, they're absolutely right, that this is something that I need to incorporate. You may not agree with everything, or at first anyway, but at least it tells you what to look for. And I've always found them to be very helpful. It does take time. And we'll see when we get into the pros and cons, one of the issues with working with the university press is time. Peer reviews going to take about 3 months. And so if you're in a hurry, uh, this is not for you, because it is a process. In fact, if you are just submitting chapters with the book proposal and the peer review recommends further consideration, then the press will come back to you and ask you for the full manuscript. And that will go to peer review for one more review. And that's another 3 or 4 months. So you can see already time in the review itself is a consideration. Once you get your contract, this says, we love it. We've seen your chapters. Peer reviewer said, go forward. We said, go forward. You did. Then you wrote your narrative. We sent the narrative to peer review. They said, looks great, or maybe change this or that. We all think it's great. Now here's the contract. It's saying that you have to finish this project within a certain amount of time. And now, if you've seen one contract, you've seen one contract. Every contract's going to be different. In general, however, these are some of the things that the university press will ask of you and the contract to agree to and that is the scope. Again, the word length. They may say no longer than 100,000 words or no longer than 75,000 words. And that is what you must follow. And what will be part of it? Will there be an illustration section? Will there be an index? Will there be a discography? Will there be endnotes? All these things are part of the agreement. The delivery details. Typically, they'll give you, 9 months to a year to finish it. Depends on how close to finishing it is. If your narrative is in pretty good shape, maybe it's only 6 months. But there are things you have to do, part of the contract, that will take time. So it's not just like, hey, great, I finished the narrative. They said it's great. I can just turn it in and we're done. No. There's a thing called permissions. If you have done any interviews with people for your book, if you have quoted music notes or lyrics or poetry or lines, extended sections of books, you have to get permission to use those pieces. That's intellectual property. So you're going to have to go, if you haven't already, if you interview people, I encourage you to get their permissions up front to save yourself any trouble later. But you will need to get expressed written signed permission from people that participate in your book, interviewees, people whose work you've quoted from extensively enough so that it does not fall within the fair use part where you can do a little bit and be okay. But if you quote a whole poem, for example, you have to get permission from that poet or from the estate or the publisher to quote that. These are all things you need to get. You're going to need to get an index, and there's a couple of other things. You're going to need a copy editor. And if there's one tidbit of information that you get from this presentation today, I would say copy editor. I don't care where you publish. Make sure, if you're a first-time writer, get a copy editor to go through your language. Nothing is more embarrassing as a writer or a reader than to see a final product that has typographical errors, has syntactical errors like missing commas, or it looks sloppy. And you're going to be so immersed in your project that you may not see everything. I can tell you from experience and from people I've spoken to, one gentleman I spoke to could not get his fiction work published for love or money. And then he talked to somebody who said, you need a copy editor. Got him a copy editor, redid it, resubmitted, it was published. So that's how important it is. If anything else, make sure you get a copy editor to look over your work. I would recommend even doing that before you submit your manuscript. The chapters for peer review, that's okay. Everyone expects that it's not going to be a finished product, but when you're sending in your final manuscript for the contract, get a copy editor so that the peer review, the university press will copy edit your work a couple of times, but You don't want to provide something sloppy for them. It just takes them more time. It lengthens the amount of time it takes for your book to get out. Get that copy editor to look at it from a brand new perspective. They will find things. I guarantee it. I don't care how good a writer you are. They will find things that will make your work better. So that's a cost, and you will need that person. You will also probably, if you have an index, need to hire an indexer, and the university press will provide you with a list of people who do that for a living. And you need, so if you need an indexer, I mean, you might try to do it yourself. I know of somebody who has. I that's above my pay grade. Indexes have different levels of complexity. They can be simple general indexes, or they can have subject indexes. A city called Heaven had a general index of names and places, and then a song index so that people could go and find songs alphabetically. So that's another expense. And then third are images. So if you're going to have illustrations or images in your book, those cost money, and you need permission from the image rights holder, to publish them. That all takes time that you have to factor in when you have a contract and you need to move forward on it. Images can cost, $25 to $50 if it's coming from a library or an archives. You want it to be in at least 300 DPI, probably more like 600 DPI, but your publisher will provide you with the art direction on that. But be careful. Images were the most expensive part of my first book. And in fact, for my second book, there was one image that I wanted. And I went to what I thought was the rights holder, and they wanted to charge me $1,250 for this one image that they didn't even own. But because it was found in a newspaper that they owned, they didn't have the original image, they still had the ability to. I said, that is about 3 years of royalties. There's no way I'm using that image. It's too expensive. So, know that those are some of the things you're going to deal with when it comes to your contract. And once you get the okay to write the book, what your expectations are. Now, in terms of contract, copyright, typically the press, if it's a university press, will want to own the copyright. You can argue to own the copyright. That is a negotiable tool in the contract. I like to own my own copyright. Some others, it's not such a big deal. Commercial presses, self-publishing, you can generally own the copyright with no problem. University presses may ask for the copyright. Other presses, business presses may ask for the copyright. I would hold out if you can to own the copyright. If it's a deal breaker, you have to decide, but I would try to do that. Royalties. Again, this is not a get rich quick scheme. You're talking probably 6-7% on hard copy, maybe 10 to 12% on ebooks. So do not go into this thinking you're going to make a buck. Where you will make your money is in speaking opportunities, in other projects. People read your book and say, hey, I'd love you to participate in this or that, and the marketing of your book to build up your own brand. And we'll talk about that in particular with self-publishing. It is a tool. So I'll never make back all the money that I spent on my first book, but it has given me other opportunities that ultimately will make up for that. And then a number of free copies and that. You can take your contract to a lawyer if you'd like to have them look over it. If you're a first-time author, and it looks like a pretty standard contract and kind of covers a lot of the things we're looking at here. I don't know that you need to pay an attorney to look at it. If it would make you more comfortable, fine. But the experience I had, my first book, I went and I took it to an attorney, and he said, this is a first-time author. You don't have a whole lot of leverage. There's really nothing in here that's egregious. It's pretty standard. They're not asking for anything out of the ordinary. I'd go for it. So, and I did, and they were right. So those are some of the things that'll be in a contract for university press. So finally, this is a brand new thing. Abstracts and keywords. They'll likely also ask you to write a little paragraph, maybe 200 words, about every chapter in your book, and then the keywords, so that for search engine optimization, the ebook can be found, or the book online can be found, to help generate sales and interest in your book. That is a brand new thing that has happened, and so I would kind of recommend that you do that early. as you're writing your chapters, and even as you're writing your chapters outline, this will really help you to kind of outline your book so that it makes flow. It has common sense flow to it. And I think writing that abstract and keyword document early on will help you to focus and structure your thoughts in a way that will make best sense to the reader. So let's go to the commercial press. Um, the difference between a commercial press and a university press is in degree of difficulty. University press is a lot, I'd say, easier to work with. A commercial press, you need to have an agent. It's very hard, and I will qualify this. There are a couple of types of commercial presses. There's the big commercial presses like a Houghton Mifflin or a McGraw-Hill, Doubleday, big commercial presses. You, chances are, unless you are a recognized celebrity, are going to have a hard time going to those presses yourself. They are used to working with book agents, and book agents they trust. And so I would not even try if you are a first-time author of a fiction book or a nonfiction book with commercial potential. That is, it's not academic necessarily or needs to go through a peer review process, has a wider, broader audience. Maybe it's on the Beatles as opposed to a very specific type of music that only a certain segment of the population is interested in. Um, you're going to want to go to a commercial press, but you need an agent. And for that, there's a couple of places to go to look for an agent. And again, just like what we talked about earlier in this presentation, if you are looking for a particular type of publisher, you need to know kind of what kind of book you're writing. Same for agents. Poets and Writers is a publication that on its website has the names of agents and publishers that look for specific types of books. I use the Guide to Literary Agents. I'm sure they'll have a 2021 version out soon if they don't already. It lists agents by the kinds of work they accept. And I really recommend, if you are looking for a commercial press, that you use this resource. Now, one of the tips that I will give you is that if you see literary agents in this book that you feel match up with your project, maybe reach out to them through LinkedIn. Start a conversation with them. Try not to just sort of sell them, hey, I need you as an agent, but start to build a relationship. In fact, most agents are going to want to see if they show interest in your project, they're going to want to see a book proposal. The structure of a book proposal we talked about with the university presses, very much the same for literary agents. They might have their own sort of way they want to see it, and it may not be quite as lengthy. And for fiction writers, usually they want to know the summary of the story, maybe not chapter by chapter, but a good sense of the plot so that they can understand, does this excite me as a potential reader that I want to read more? Or is it, maybe you need to go back and work on this one, or maybe this isn't right, maybe the right fit. Do not be discouraged, whether it's a university press or an agent. They get inundated. And so if an agent declines to even accept your LinkedIn request, do not be discouraged. There are many people out there. Just keep diligent. Remember, discipline, energy, and focus are your keys. Find the literary agents that make sense. Send them a LinkedIn request and time it. Again, have your book proposal ready. Have a chapter or two ready before you really dig deep into this, so that if they say, hey, I'd love to see your work, show it to me. And you don't say, well, I won't be ready for another 5 months. Have it ready. So you may want to do that preliminary work. Get your proposal, get your at least one chapter really in good shape, so you can say, here's my work, and see what you think. You're going to need that for that, because that agent is going to be literally your representative, and they get paid if they sell a book to a commercial press. They want to sell it. You got to make it as easy for them to sell it as possible. Otherwise, if they find it difficult to sell to an agent or to a commercial press, you will be discouraged, they will be discouraged, and maybe the relationship won't go so well. Again, book proposal is very important when you're talking about a commercial press because, again, they're going to want to see it. Let me just stay with commercial press for a second. In this case, there are a couple of things. If your agent is able to sell your project to a commercial press, you're still going to go through the contract portion. Now, the agent will be able to help you with that, because in this case, you may be talking about something that is not rare in university press world, but it's certainly not as generous, and that is an advance. If you're working on a project, and a commercial press is probably going to want a fairly quick turnaround time on getting the book done. An advance will help you do that. Your agent can help you negotiate that advance. Of course, the agent gets paid too. So, but this relationship with an agent can last you your entire literary career. So finding the right agent, really finding the right agent, finding the right copy editor, finding the right editor. These are all people, and eventually, probably an attorney will be critical to you if you become a full-time writer, where you don't have to just spend Friday afternoons or 2 hours a day at 6 a.m. to write, where you are writing for a living all day, every day, and writing fiction or nonfiction. The agent and your attorney and your copy editor and editor will be very important to you. So they will be able to negotiate a deal with the commercial press to get your book out. Now, in those instances, your agent can help you formulate the contract and work with you to make sure that your needs are being met, and that the press will accept the project. And again, it's going to be the scope of the work. As I said before, chances are, if you're a first-time author, a big book that's several inches thick probably isn't going to fly. But if you're an established author, you might have that chance. And the timing and the deliverables. If it's due in 9 months, you have to have it ready in 9 months. If it's going to have illustrations, you will need to get permissions, particularly with commercial versus university. Because university presses are nonprofits, sometimes the cost of the images are a little less. But if it's a commercial press where the difference in printing, for example, a university press might print 2,500 copies of your book. But a commercial press, if it's a book on the Beatles, they might have an initial run of 50 to 100,000 copies. Depends on, President Obama's book. They sold 800,000 copies before it came out. So they, obviously had a huge run. Well, the bigger the run, the more expensive it is to get images, because obviously there's a wider audience. So you need to know that going in. There are some costs that may, at the university press level, would not be as onerous as it might be with the commercial press. But again, you've got an advance. Your agent can help you with that, getting copyrights, permissions, illustrations, all of those things that cost money. So this is the experience with the commercial press. Again, I just want to encourage you to really look at a guide to literary agents. It is an indispensable item to really look at. Some agents might be ideal for you, but they're not accepting new projects. And those are some of the conversations you will have online once you connect with them. And so take your time and really do your due diligence and find the right agent. Again, you might find a relationship that will last you through the rest of your career. Now, I'm really talking a lot about big commercial presses. There are boutique commercial presses that exist too, that are perhaps a little easier to get to, and maybe you don't need an agent to get to them. How do you find out who those are? Well, there is I would go to local book festivals when they open up again after COVID, and see who some of the local book publishers are there. If you are a new author, if you're a first-time author, I would try to go local if you can, at least local first, because local publishers, particularly if they're interested in your area of expertise or your subject matter or your fiction, the fact that you're a local artist or local writer will make a big difference, because then they can have you as a speaker and they don't have to fly you in and sort of thing. So if they know if you're from Seattle and it's a Seattle publisher, small boutique Seattle publisher, they'll like the fact that you're local. They can do more with, have more presentations and book signings. I would also go to book signings, book readings. They often list them in the paper. Again, some of them are online now, so it's not so easy to do networking. But again, we all hope and pray that we will be able to get out and about soon. And so I would go to book readings and signings and just see who that author used. Go to a bookstore and look at books that are like yours. Look at the introduction and the acknowledgments and see, who does that author cite? Who's their agent? Who's their publisher? Who do they thank as their copy editor or their editor? Write these names down. Oftentimes, then you can go on LinkedIn and find them and send them a LinkedIn request, and that might be a way to find your person. But again, make sure it's somebody who really fits your area, because otherwise it's likely you'd just be wasting time. Those are the kinds of things you can do, is go and do some research or sleuthing on your own. The agent is going to be the one that's going to find the commercial press. You don't have to worry so much about that. But for the boutique presses, the small ones, if you're looking at commercial small presses, probably don't need an agent. You can do that yourself. So the final part I want to get to is self-publishing. Many of the rules, with maybe the exception of the book proposal, apply here. There are lots of self-publishing companies out there, and more every day. Key piece is what we've been talking about with the commercial press, the boutique press, the university press, is you want to find a publisher that matches your field. So if you write religious material, you want to find a self-publisher that works in that particular area. If you write about history or local history, you want to find a self-publisher that does that. And when I say self-publish, these are places that basically take what you have written and print it. And so it's not so much this issue of proposals and is it a match. They will publish your book. You pay for it. They will print it for you and send it to you, and then you pass it around and you sell it. But even so, because there are so many of them, you want to find somebody that matches your field, and then also see who has credibility among other self-publishers. So if you are writing a book on collies and you want to publish it yourself, find other people who have self-published dog books and see who they used, and reach out to those publishers, and even reach out to the author and say, I know you use this self-publishing company. Was your experience a good one? Because that can also help. And honestly, in any publisher, if you can get a hold of an author and just say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of using so-and-so. What has been your experience, so that you don't end up with a publisher that you're very angry and wish you hadn't done it. Self-publishers, I would recommend getting a copy of the Writer's Market. Even for boutique publishers, that you're interested in boutique publishers, get a copy of the Writer's Market. Again, I'm sure there's a 2021 out. It lists all kinds of places. If you have a copy of the Writer's Market and a guide to literary agents, you're on your way to doing your research, and will help you in many ways. I would say if you try to do any of this without referencing these materials, even at your local library, you're not doing yourself justice. Definitely, this is a great help. It'll give you the publishers by what they accept, when they accept, their guidelines. It'll give you a lot of details, and some of them may just not be accepting, and that's okay. But this way you have a good reference book that you can go through and find the places that might work for you. So, just in summary, a university press, what are the pros of working with a university press? Your work will remain in print. They may run out of copies, but they will print more if there's demand. It will receive peer review, which is very important, from saving you from yourself by making egregious mistakes that end up getting published. And somebody will say, well, didn't you know about such and such? Well, peer review really helps vet your book in a way that almost no other kind of publisher can, except maybe the real large ones. It will get into the libraries. University presses, that used to be their main claim to fame, was that they would get your book in every library. They will do more than that now, but for sure your book can get into libraries. It's a little easier to secure a contract, as we talked about. They're willing to work with you. They give you some marketing assistance. I will say, in all instances, be prepared to do a lot of the marketing yourself. I don't care if you're going to the biggest publisher on the planet. you as the author are going to be responsible for most of the marketing. So this goes across the board. But university presses, I've always had great experience with them giving me a lot of marketing assistance. There's potential for literary awards that are helpful in getting your work greater recognition. And again, speaking engagements to sell your books, to maybe make some honoraria. That's where your money and your income comes in. The cons to university presses: no big advances, no big royalties. This is not a money-making scheme. You might get your book in the major bookstores. My city called Heaven got into Barnes and Noble in Chicago, the biggest Barnes and Noble. It was there for a couple of weeks until the Star Wars book came out, and then it was moved right off that the front shelf and back to the music section as soon as Star Wars came out. So I couldn't compete with Star Wars. I couldn't compete with Darth Vader. But they will be in there for a while, but not for long. It's difficult to get reviews in major publications like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times because they are focused on the major commercial presses. And I guess you notice it's a lengthy production time. It could be as long as a couple of years to get your book from, the for the first date you contact the publisher and they say, hey, we like your book proposal. It could be 2 years. So be prepared for that. Commercial press, lots of pros: better chance at a big advance, better chance at little larger royalties. You'll have bookstore exposure for longer periods. It will get into libraries. You can walk through the airport and be proud to see your book maybe on the shelves there. You will have a greater chance to get reviews in major publications, potentially shorter production time because you don't have peer review and those sorts of things. Literary awards, review in major publications, all a great thing. Even a movie deal maybe, because again, you might have written something and a university press, it may not get the attention of the moguls, but they might see your book prominently displayed, and that might be there. Not to say movie deals can't come from university publishers or from academic books. I think Hamilton is a great example of how a major musical came from a program that was a book that was originally an academic book. Cons, of course, difficult to secure. You're going to need an agent unless you go to a local boutique press, and even then, you're probably then not talking about better chance at advance, better charge at royalty. Some of these won't necessarily. It'll be more of a size issue. You get boutique press, you'll get their attention and their marketing, but it's likely that you won't get the kind of heft that you would get from a major commercial press. And the poor sellers, if your book doesn't sell so well, they'll be remaindered. It means sold at lower rates or liquidated. Hopefully your ego is strong enough that if you were to walk by Barnes and Noble and see your 1995 book on sale for $4, that you won't be embittered. This happens, but poor sellers do get taken out of. University presses keep them in their catalog. Poor sellers are dropped from commercial press catalog. Self-publishing pros: anyone can get a book published. They will do it for you. You can get more net income from sales is probably the greatest pro from self-publishing. You set the price, you sell it, you're paying up front for the copies. They sell them to you. You sell them to the reader. You make the net revenue. You have complete editorial control. Nobody's telling you what to write or what not to write. I would say it's best to use if you use them to market your product. If you're a financial advisor and you've written a book on financial advice, it's a great way to promote yourself. If you are a religious writer and you're a pastor or an evangelist, it's a great way as a promotion to leave ways to help build your brand. Of course, the cons is anyone can get a book published. You're in there with everybody else. And, just like with anything, you'll have people who are really good at it and some who aren't good at it. And if you're published, self-published, you can be compared to people who self-publish books that are not good, because what goes in goes out. WGIGO. If you make mistakes, if you make spelling errors, if you make syntactical errors, and it's embarrassing, they don't care. They're printing what you gave them. So you want to make sure you have a bandbox neat project if you're self-publishing, because if it goes out with looking sloppy, that's not their problem. It's yours. It's not likely to get into a bookstore or library because, well, unless you get it there, but you're going to have to do that. That's the thing. There'll be little to no marketing assistance to you from them. They're expecting you to do it all. A little potential for literary awards or recognition. Honestly, um, self-publishing is a great marketing tool. It's a great way if you want to make a few bucks from writing. It does not have the credibility in the publishing market. However, if that is the only way you can get a book published and you really want to publish it, do the very best job you can. Get a good copy editor, put your best foot forward, get a great book out there. And then at least when you want to write your next book, you can say, I did this one. And even though it's not on a big press, they probably won't. They probably like the idea that you've gone through the experience. So at this point, just my final thoughts to you are really this. Don't be discouraged. You're going to get a lot of rejections. Let them roll off your back. It's just not the right fit. Or you're going to learn something about your writing or your subject that will help you in the next round. Um, Once you have one book published, you'll have a greater chance of getting more done. You'll have a greater chance of getting more negotiating power. If you had a really good experience selling your last book and you earned a big following, your next book, it'll be easier to market. You'll have an easier chance to get an agent. Um, Again, don't expect to get rich from writing. And finally, do look at, and I believe the writer's market has some of these. Look for some fellowships. If you are working full time and you're looking to take time off to write, there are scholarships and fellowships and awards sometimes you can get. You could apply to that. You can help fund your writing. So at that, I will let it go. And I thank you very much for your time. And I hope that some elements or some kernels of truth came through that will help you in your search for the right publisher. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. I think that was one of the most insightful discussion about what to publish and where to publish and what are the pros and cons. And I think that was enlightening element for most of the budding authors who wants to publish their first
Thank
book.
you. Thank you.
So we really appreciate your effort.
Thank you. Thank you
So,
for inviting me.
and once again, we thank Mr. Robert Marowitz, who has delivered one of the most insightful talk on publishing. So I hope all the viewers who are going to visit and see this webinar will get something out of it, and that can definitely help them in getting what they want and finally achieve what they deserve. So having said, so Apex Solutions Limited is really happy in organizing these webinars. And as we are a publishing services organization, and all the budding authors who are interested in publishing their books, so we are here to help you. So we are in business since 1998, and we are into all aspects of publishing services, right from conversion to typesetting, copy editing, and what are the the things which Mr. Robert has discussed in the webinar. So we are masters in everything, and at the same time we can also help you in marketing as well. So with the insights of Robert and with the skills of Apex Solutions Limited, you can get your book published in no time. So let's get in touch, and let's get in touch, and we can also get in touch with Mr. Robert, and we can also help you out in coming up with the new with your new publication. So thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Robert, let's meet again, and maybe we
Yes.
can have another discussion. So, and thank you
Yes.
very much
Thank you.
to all the viewers, and hope you all have a very good day, and happy new year, and also Merry Christmas, which is around the
Yes.
corner.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Raj. And
Thank
happy
you.
holidays and happy new year to you and everyone at Apex. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.
You too. Bye-bye.